the Q&A session. So is there any question from the other audience to any of the speakers? So no one. Let's check if someone from okay, sorry. Okay, not yet anyone from the Zoom, so I will start. So, Vladan, you were with your video talking about these black holes and these individual caves. So after looking at the video, is there any hope? So we've seen that the influence, no, or the power of these big tech companies in influencing these black holes and setting up, no, this new order of how we consume, how we behave, how will be, no, this future society. Is there any time yet to counterbalance this, or is any way that we should react, as Marc was saying?
Okay. Well, maybe I'm not the best person to answer that. I'm kind of coming from like a strange place when we are kind of like a bit negative about everything, but I don't know. I think it's really important to counter this positive narrative, because there are like so many, like the force is really strong in a sense of like power of capital, of everything. So they have like, you know, potential to do whatever and to create new narratives, to create new, you know, for example, we tend to speak about clouds, about, you know, all of those like narratives. So I think it's really, even if it sounds depressive most of the time, and my students are also like kind of like exhausted by this like negative narrative. I think it's really important to have that in order to kind of like shift the balance to another side, to try to create some kind of like, you know, like critical thinking about the power, critical thinking about like how we end up here, and not to jump on this like, you know, techno-utopian projections that are so strong out there. There are many ways out, I believe. I think, of course, it's not the end of the world. Even maybe it is near, but never mind. There are like, we can think, you know, like, for example, one strategy, it's sometimes like coming within the power structure. So let's make better Facebook, you know, like let's make better AI, ethical AI. So try to intervene within the space. Another one, it's say, okay, let's try to build a new one, you know, and that one, it's also naive, because like, you know, like the power, it's so strong that it's hard to even compete with the new, you know, for example, like, you know, diaspora compared to Facebook, or, you know, this kind of stories. And then like a, you know, third option can be, you know, like burn them, or kind of more radical one, or like abandon all of this and go into the, you know, woods and try to live some kind of primitive life. So there is like variety of different kinds of solutions that we can have, and so, but it's up to each of us to choose, you know, where are you on the spectrum, you know, and I don't think there is a one solution. I think also like, you know, any attempt is good, you know, from any part of the spectrum. I think what is important that there is some kind of, let's say, counter narrative, counter ideas, counter something, counter cartographies, or something like this.
So you've been talking to also about transparency. So we start to see several processes that they are discriminated by AI. So maybe to give a loan, some grants, or there was some, if I'm not wrong, process in the UK, you know, about, I think, reallocating or allocating schools that they identified some bias about that they were fostering segregation and discrimination. So who should be accountable for this transparency, or who should be the responsible, and what kind of institution or processes we should put to give this, first, this awareness, because it's a way not to be aware of the impact that the AI or some other technologies is giving, but what do you think, maybe Marek, how we should put this infrastructure and this framework of transparency?
Yeah, maybe I will touch a little bit upon the previous question as well, because I'm a little bit worried when I hear it. I think the spectrum of the options is much more limited because we live in globalized world, and it's really difficult to take, if we decide to go back to the trees, we cannot take Europe out of the earth. So it's just not feasible. At least we don't know how to do it at the moment. And so at least for the time being, I think it's really important to create a system where there is no power which is technologically superior, whose values we don't want to actually follow. Because this is what happened in history. Who is technologically superior will dictate and exploit. And you know, this is probably going to happen again, unless we are really cautious about it and we really try to develop a system which would be, you know, we're back to competition in a way. So which would be competitive at the global scale. Now I mean global by the earth. So I think our options are really much more limited, and we need to be acting in this under these limitations, under these constraints. And that takes me nicely, I think, to transparency. Actually, I think there needs to be transparency at many levels, and you know. The question is quite simple. Right? The answer to the question is simple. I think we need public funding for that. Huge public funding to all the research on the safety, on making sure AI does not bring about the harm, and this is just a part of it. Transparency, important part of it. So I think, and then we need second part, which is more regulatory, I believe, which is kind of mandating transparency. And this will be difficult to develop when you want to be competitive at the same time. So, but at the beginning, I think, you know, I believe in positive incentives, not in punishing people and punishing companies and punishing anyone. So I think we should be really thinking how we could create positive motivation. So money works, we know that. There might be some other ways how to positively motivate, especially companies, you know, and talk to them. As Bruce said, you know, they have maybe some trust in Brussels. So let's work with that, and identify the ways they come up with solutions, so they become part of the solution, not part of the problem. So really important is to finance transparency about the impacts which I was talking about. And I've been, like last, you know, a year, I've been thinking about it. We have a lot of data, but we do not have the data about the impact, which is puzzling me a little bit. It's really strange. So we have all this data, we use it, and we use it in order to optimize something, to make money, and to make the business models of different entities successful. But we don't have the data about what it does to us, what it does to people, what it does to the society. And as I see it now, as I conceptualize it now, we don't have the right incentives to create the data, and to gather it in a way it would be useful in order to understand the impact. So this is why I'm proposing this kind of like an open impact assessment platform, which would help to generalize the hypothesis, and then through that, like next natural step in science is that you gather the data. So we will know what kind of data we want to actually gather. So I think this is crucial.
Yeah, I'm a really big, fan of transparency, and I spend a lot of time, my life to try to be part of that game, to try to make things more transparent. But there is a crucial problem with this idea of transparency, from my point of view, of like algorithmic transparency, is that for example, if you take this example of flash crash in 2008, no? So you had like two trading algorithms that somehow messed the not 2008, I think it was 2004. So you had like two trading algorithms that somehow clashed between each other, and then you had like, like the stock market fell down and stuff like this. And then like they needed like 2 years to investigate this event, what happened. And we have now in this moment like thousands and thousands and maybe even millions of different algorithms that are running wild and doing whatever they want in a sense. And then if we just freeze this time and say from now on nothing is happening, we are banning all technology until we don't understand each of the algorithms, what is the impact of this algorithm, no? So it will create some kind of new bureaucracy that will eat our economies in a sense, like, you need like huge bureaucracy to deal with that. And it's not just a question of bureaucracy, it's also a question of expertise in a sense, because like the Google, Facebook and others, they are in position to take and buy the best students, the best professors from the university, and especially in the context of like countries that are, for example, third world countries, like they don't have capacity to deal with algorithmic transparency, So it is a role of Europe, maybe that because Europe kind of like, concentrated capital on like colonial practice and exploitation of others. Maybe it's now our role to give back. So it's kind of like, yeah. I don't know. For my point of view, it's really hard to how we are going to do that exactly.
Actually, as any knowledge, AI can be bad or good. That's for sure, and that's why the ethics and Europe regulations are interesting in there. Also because they push people to have ethics by design, privacy by design systems which are built up. And I think that if people understand that they get more than they can lose from the system, and even if a hacker goes in between and tries to get data, they will not be able to do a lot of harm, etc. They will be able to accept the algorithm. It is also a matter of acceptance from. You cannot sell something to people who do not accept the system, so that's also something which is important. So finally, the ethics at the beginning, you can say, okay, it's some pain in the neck and it slows down the technology, but I think at the end it will make you'll be able to sell it if it's really ethical, and it would be much more complicated to sell it if it's not. Or you can hide it, and then you need someone to have a big cartography to see what's hidden in there, etc. So I think that it can really help. Humanity in general, but for that we need some regulation, and it's not easy to define the proper regulation for that. That's all the big deal here.
So coming back to the impact assessment, maybe Juan, how do you audit in your case this impact assessment? What kind of indicators do you use, or how do you relate to, for example, the ethics and social impact?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that still it seems that we are discussing about the ethics behind the use of the algorithms, but not rather the emancipated algorithms as something that is evolving themselves. But we are still discussing about the use some corporations or some companies are making of data. So I think that if we put the narrative in more simple terms, maybe it's easier to define how to regulate, how to do this control in some way. Because sometimes I think that we cannot see the trees because we are overwhelmed. So about the impact assessment, so in our specific application domain, which is healthcare for treating neurologically injured patients, we have a few, we would say, successful examples of robotic devices that have been used for almost 20 years to deliver treatment in a way that could be equivalent to what a human clinician or a physical therapist could do, with advantages in terms of like a musculoskeletal risk for the professionals, and also increasing the intensity of the therapy and being more precise and having more accurate and objective evaluation of what is the outcome of the therapy, and so on. So we could say that we have reached a level in which we have basically an equivalent result if you compare that to the manual therapy. However, this is insufficient because we need to prove that it is worthy to invest, and that there is still the payers will basically decide to pay for these machines at some point, so it will be maintained as an industry, because it's still not yet defined as an industry, in my opinion. So we are still figuring out which will be the future of this specific type of robotic devices for neurological patients. So we really need to address how to, as I was trying to explain, how to interact with the users in a intelligent manner, so that we could optimize these results. But in that challenge, we need to make these systems more smart, but this leads to the problem of safety, liability, and ethics. So we are a little bit in this dilemma at this moment. So how far can we allow these machines to interact by themselves? So if we somehow manage to cope with this roadblock that we have, I think that we will be seeing an increase in the advantages and the possibilities that these systems may bring to society as means to recover humans that unfortunately are more and more being affected by this type of damage. So what we try to do is, from a product perspective point of view, is to analyze the impact basically on the safety aspects. So we basically define a risk analysis, and we try to follow existing regulatory items that we could use as reference, although there are already some existing regulatory standards for this type of interactive robots. But we are working on producing more and more, and we have projects on this benchmarking and standardization of robotic systems for humans.
Can I just very quick comment on the impact assessment of the needs of it? I would be very cautious to leave it to the market, to the acceptance purely, because not necessarily people have the knowledge. Just think about tobacco. Just people don't have the knowledge it is harmful. So you have to take up at the market, but it is harmful at the end and cost, I don't know, at least thousands, probably millions of deaths. So I would be very cautious about this. As well, some of these applications which are being used by billions of people today, and not necessarily they actually meet all these the highest ethical standards as you would envisage according to current rules. So I think it's our obligation, to use current science to do the risk assessment. So at least to inform the people, even without regulating, just to inform the people, bring in the science, use it as much as we can, the capabilities of current science, and produce the information, and give it to the public. And what is really challenging is what Warren was mentioning, how to do it quickly. And I think we need a new approach, not bureaucratic, much more crowdsourcing and open. So yeah, that's my point.
Okay, so we could be discussing topics like this one for hours, but unfortunately we ran out our time. So thank you very much for the speakers, and we will close the panel here. Thank you.